Oh, for my sake do you with fortune chide, the guilty goddess of my harmful deeds, that did not better for my life provide than public means, which public manners breeds. Thence comes it that my name receives a brand, and almost thence my nature is subdued to what it works in, like the dyer's hand. Pity me then, and wish I were renewed, whilst, like a willing patient, I will drink potions of eisel against my strong infection. No bitterness that I will bitter think, nor double penance to correct correction. Pity me then, dear friend, and I assure ye, e'en that your pity is enough to cure me. All right, so we're picking up where we left off the last few days. Shakespeare has cheated on the fair youth, and he's trying to defend himself. He's trying to explain his behavior and his misconduct. So he says, look, if you have issues with the way that I live my life, don't blame me, blame Lady Fortune, because she's the one that didn't give me any better means of providing for myself than public means, by which we can assume he's talking about his career in the theater, which public manners breeds, which is not necessarily conducive to the most moral or upstanding of behavior. So he's saying that's the reason that my name gets dragged through the mud, and that's the reason that my very nature itself is almost completely submerged in this immorality that I'm just surrounded by on a daily basis, like the dyer's hand, like someone who works dyeing fabrics and then comes home at night and their hands are all sorts of different colors because of the dyes that they've absorbed from working. It's kind of like that expression, if you lie down with dogs, you're bound to pick up fleas, or whatever it is, that you pick up the bad behavior of the people that you're surrounded by on a regular basis. And so he's saying, don't be angry with me. You should pity me that I have to live surrounded by this immorality, that I have to do this on a daily basis just to survive. And he says, you should wish that I could get a new start, that I could start over. While, like a willing patient, I will drink potions of eisel. Eisel was a solution of vinegar. It's actually what they gave Christ on the cross, and it was used to treat the plague. Infection was the code word for plague. So he's saying, I will gladly drink potions of vinegar to treat my infection, my infidelity. And no matter how bitter it tastes, I won't think that it tastes bitter. I won't complain about it, and I'll do double penance, and I will correct things that I've already corrected. But pity me, and I assure you that even that, your pity, not even your love, but just your pity will be enough to cure me of my wayward ways, of my infidelity. So that's what Shakespeare's saying. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. I obviously haven't been doing all of the sonnets, but I've tried really hard to pick a representative sampling of them, at least enough to keep the narrative structure of the sonnets intact, because the sonnets do tell a story when you read them all in order. And some sonnets I've chosen just because they're stunningly beautiful, because they have some beautiful poetry, and I want to share those with you. Some sonnets I choose because they contain an important plot point in the narrative, in Shakespeare's relationship with the fair youth. Some sonnets I choose because they're anomalies in the sonnets. They stand out because they're different, like Sonnet 99, for example. I was looking at that because it was 15 lines instead of 14, and I'm interested in why is this different, that sort of thing. Some sonnets I choose because I think that they contain really interesting autobiographical insight into William Shakespeare himself. And that's why I chose this sonnet. I think it's fascinating. You can see in this sonnet the tension in his relationship with the fair youth over his work in the theater. You can see that, remember that Shakespeare was not born into nobility. He was the son of a glover. He maybe had a 6th grade education tops, so he was clearly self-educated. And he worked his way up the ranks just through his sheer talent and ability as a writer. Whereas the fair youth was a nobleman and was born into wealth and inherited that money, born with a silver spoon in his mouth. So you can see Shakespeare saying, like, if you think that what I do isn't dignified, well, fuck you, because I have to do this to survive. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth like you were, and this is what I have to do. And I just find that fascinating. Now, I should also clarify that I'm making two very bold assumptions in my interpretation of the sonnets, assumptions that other people will argue with me about. First, that I think that the sonnets are autobiographical. Other people say you can't prove that. They might just be works of fiction. I can't help it. I can't read these sonnets without thinking that they're autobiographical because they're just so personal and raw. I just can't possibly read them as an exercise in fiction. I think that he's putting his heart and soul into these. And also, I'm working under the assumption that Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, was the man who, in fact, wrote these plays and sonnets. Because there are some people that I really respect even, that say that Shakespeare was just a pseudonym. It was someone else who wrote these plays and sonnets. I'll be honest, I think that's bullshit. I think that Shakespeare worked very hard on his plays and sonnets, and you should give him credit because he worked very hard on them. But the argument that someone else wrote Shakespeare's sonnets really just goes something like this. Well, Shakespeare only had a 6th grade education tops. He couldn't possibly have known enough. He couldn't possibly have been educated enough to have written these. So they must have been written by a nobleman, someone who was better educated and higher up in society, who just didn't want to be publicly associated with their work, with their plays and such. To me, this sonnet discredits both of those premises. He's saying, look, I have to do this to survive, essentially. I did not inherit my wealth. I am not noble. I have to work in the theater in order to put food on the table. And also he's saying, I live my life in the public. I can't help it. That's what I have to do. So again, that's why I think that this sonnet just disproves all of the anti-Stratfordian theories out there that Shakespeare didn't write them. But, that's me. I think that Shakespeare wrote his plays and sonnets, and I'm very grateful that he did. So, anywho, I won't get too much into that because it's a rabbit hole. But that's Sonnet 111. We'll be back with more tomorrow. All my love, everybody. Stay safe. Bye.